I just interviewed Naguib Sawiris. He's a billionaire with an empire that spans from railroads to telcos and has invested in everywhere from Yemen to Europe. He's known for his appetite for risk.
Go into places that nobody wants to go to.
His latest project is this media brand, Moniify, tailored towards young people in emerging markets.
We looked at Bloomberg, at CNBC. I don't think they're talking to the young generation coming up.
On Money Moves, I speak with the biggest names in business. As an entrepreneur and academic, I delve into their personal journeys to understand who they are and how their experience can help you find your next opportunities.
Sometimes you could make more money if you were more patient.
You're going to get a lot of unfiltered insights from Naguib. He shares the very negotiating tactic that birthed his 28-country telco empire. But he also reveals how anger led him to lose over $500 million.
In one shot, in one night, in cash.
In this interview, he explains what you should do to get richer than him. Naguib, everyone knows you as a billionaire, but not everyone knows that you also moonlight as a DJ. How did you get into that, and what makes you still do it to this day?
Music is my passion. I mean, if you want to ask me what makes you happy, it's like whenever I listen to good music, it makes me happy, and I listen to music a lot. In the car, in my shower, during my shower. I actually like to shower with my music on. And music relaxes me and excites me in the same time. And so DJing, you see that you bring happiness to people too. You know? So you see the reaction of the people. If you're a lousy DJ, the dancing floor will be empty. So it's very easy to judge whether they like it or not, you know.
The market speaks. I mean, you spend more time with young people than most people of your generation.
Yeah, I stopped growing up since I was 30, you know.
What edge does that give you, having that connection?
It keeps you full of energy. You know, what is nice about young people? They have energy, they have ambition. There is a sense, still some innocence that has not been wiped by the bad experiences of life. So when you are a partner to these people or you go out with these people, you always feel energized. When you go out with older people, they always they are more serious and they are more slow with and very careful what they say and what they dress and what they do. And I'm not like that. I'm a Gemini, and I take my freedom to the maximum, you know.
And that connection and opportunity with young people, I'd like to talk to you about Moniify from the top. It's the media sector as a whole, and specifically business media, is one that's quite challenging and has been known to lose money. And you're a man who's known to make money. So why invest tens of millions of dollars and launch a brand new media company? What's your end game for Moniify?
So first I'll tell you something that I've never said before. Actually, when I sold Euronews, you know, I used to own Euronews, and when I sold it, I said, this is it. That's the end of me with my media, because as you said, it was losing a lot of money every year. It's a very difficult business, you know. What made me then still come back and do Moniify is that I get asked by many young people all the time, what's the secret of success? How do we make it? How do we become like you, or how we can be better than you even, you know, like my son and others, you know, at this age. So I thought, okay, why not provide a tool, a platform that really gives everything in a package to these young people coming up and telling them, you know, and helping them achieve their dreams, you know. So I always like to give back, you know, to society, so better give to the young, to the millenniums, you know. So they have suddenly their own station, the one that they want to learn from, add to, interact with it, you know, and that was the motive. So I thought it was nice to give back, nice to provide this platform. And maybe by a stroke of luck, we can still make some money, you know.
And I was going to ask you about that.
Actually, even in Euronews, which was losing money,
yes.
I still made money selling it from what my total investment was. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah,
and what surprises, I'd love to hear about that journey. So surprises along the way during the Euronews journey that you learned from, or maybe mistakes that were made that you took some lessons out of?
It's not mistakes. It's a very tough business to make money, and especially the advertising revenue is very sensitive because you want to provide content at excellence, so it's costly. At the same time, the advertisers don't have, the same. They're very careful with what they spend, so there's always a gap, So I came out from this with the conclusion: don't invest anymore in media.
So let's come back then. Now, so you exited a couple of years ago from Euronews, and as you said, you made a promise to yourself that that's it, last time. Now, again, I guess double clicking on why take that personal reputational risk, the business risk, to try again. Any lessons that have been learned from the previous time that you're applying this time?
I took an insurance for that.
Yeah.
So by saying that my motivation is to help the young people, I want to help them become rich and even richer than me, and to achieve their dreams. So I can book it under my social work, you understand?
Yes.
So if it doesn't make any money at the end or it loses money, it's for a good cause.
On Moniify, I'd love to hear about your take as to where it sits within the media landscape.
Okay, I think we looked at Bloomberg, at CNBC, and what do you see there? You look at, there are billions of budget. The budget is in billions, and they have the stock exchanges covered, everything covered, but I call them the traditional media still. Okay, I think they didn't make the jump to the millenniums. I don't think they're talking to the millenniums. I don't think they're talking to the young generation coming up and so on. And we don't want to put billions into that business, So we came up with Moniify, focused on this age group, focused on the young people, focused on the upcoming youth that wants to make money, wants to be rich, and talk about all the elements of success, talk about all the moving ingredients, AI, the bitcoins, so all the new topics that are masterminding them, And this is your market niche. Also, Moniify is going to focus on emerging markets. These emerging markets don't take the size with these big guys that they deserve, because everybody thinks emerging markets is risky. But there's so much money to be made in the emerging markets, and therefore we decided in Moniify that we're going to focus on emerging markets, because it's also our roots where we come from,
And I know that one of your passions is in supporting the growth of emerging markets. So I'd like to maybe tell you a bit of a story. We were chatting a bit beforehand. So my family's from Iraq. My parents left, after studying in medical school in Baghdad. They moved to the UK. My dad did his PhD, my mother a master's degree, and then they moved to the US to give their kids opportunities and to study and to live. And then their eldest child went from Silicon Valley, all the capital in the world, opportunity to work for the top tech companies, left all of that, and to their complete surprise and initial dismay, went all the way back to where they started, to the Middle East, in order to start a company that sells shoes, right? So my first venture actually was Nemshi e-commerce for footwear.
Nice shoes.
Thank you, you as well. I know that in your own journey, you left Egypt, you went to the heart of Europe, studying in the best schools in Switzerland, and at the same time, your father's companies had been nationalized by Nasser. The situation in Egypt was not, so rosy, and you had a lot of opportunity elsewhere. What drove you to go back to Egypt, and what do you recommend to young people today from the global South who are studying in the West?
I love Egypt, and I would never substitute Egypt with any other country. I mean, Egypt is so unique. I mean, we have 360 days sun. It's not as hot as in Dubai here, so the weather is amazing. We have the Red Sea, the Mediterranean Sea. We have the Nile going from the north to the south. Egypt is irreplicable, and then the sense of humor of its people is unique, as you know.
Bar none.
So for me, it was very difficult to substitute Egypt with anywhere else. Okay, politics, regimes, sometimes forces you to leave, like in Iraq with Saddam and in Libya with Gaddafi and all these people. But I never left Egypt, to be honest. This was always in my mind, and my success started from Egypt, and most probably will end also in Egypt, So somehow home is home. And when you travel and you have homesickness, and you love your old. So my advice to young people, study in the West,
Okay.
get the best out of there, but come back home and make a difference. And there is a positive bonus if you come back. You will have less competition. When you are in the States, how many people graduate from MIT or Harvard? And so you are into a very tough, but how many of these people are in Egypt or India? So you come up with a very good education against locals who have not had the same opportunity. So your starting point is much more higher, and you have more odds to be successful.
And that homesickness that you talked about, I just recently experienced it actually. A couple of months ago, I had the opportunity to go to Baghdad, which actually I never lived in, right? But I had the chance to teach 60-odd students at Baghdad Business School entrepreneurship. And it was just an amazing experience to be able to be with these young people who are just so excited. One of the things that I honed in on was all the challenges they're facing on a day-to-day basis, all these difficulties are actually all opportunities, right? I'd love to hear from you your advice to entrepreneurs who may be in more difficult market conditions like Iraq.
No, I mean, Iraq is a green field now. I mean, I have a very big project in Iraq right now. I'm building a whole city outside of Baghdad, 40 minutes away from Baghdad, So Iraq really is in the starting point. It's like Dubai 30 years ago, okay? So my advice to these entrepreneurs, stick to Iraq. It might seem now a bit volatile with the politics, with the sectarial issues that they have and so on, but it's your country and it offers much more. If a guy like me comes all the way from Egypt to Iraq, then it means that there is a lot of opportunities. So my first advice, try to do it here. And when I went to Baghdad also, I found out it needs everything that is. There's nothing, so you can start from scratch and build a business, car business, housing, construction, internet, telecommunication, financing, banks, everything is beginning, so you have a very good head start.
And speaking of which, I think, going into these challenging frontier markets, a lot of people assume that in order to play that game, you need to play a certain way, but I think one of your hallmarks has been standing for your principles.
Yes, of course. I mean, if I had played that way, I wouldn't have had any problems in Syria, any problems in Yemen, and any problems in Algeria. All the motivations there was purely corruption, greed, envious that you're making so much money, but I came and took all the risks, so. But I think, you have to choose in life between going to bed at night and sleeping comfortably and feeling good about yourself, or yielding to extortion or blackmail or corruption and finding this way, because at the end, what you want to leave is a clean legacy.
Yeah, and your principles are never tested unless you're in those difficult situations.
Everybody knows who has worked with me or who is working with me, or my partners, my employees, they know that when it comes to this, Naguib will never yield to extortion.
Let's talk about reputation and how important that is to you and the role that it plays in business.
It's the A to Z, I mean, if you don't have a reputation, who's going to work with you? I mean, you can try to be someone who is dishonest, but how many times? One time. Then the name goes around this. Don't work with this guy, is dishonest, and what I think also, because I'm a bit religious, so I'm in terms of believing in God.
Yes.
Okay, most people really forget about that God is watching you. They really forget that. I mean, so do you want to really upset him by doing something wrong? It's like in school. I would have all the other guys cheating, and I would not cheat, and I would not give compare my answers with them. And they tell me, "What, are you crazy? Are you stupid?" I said, "No, I just want to, when I get my marks, I want to feel these are really my marks. This is really my evaluation, and it was not done through any other means, So you guys, if you want to have a phony certificate that you succeeded, it's phony because it was built on cheating. Second reason is the night before I prayed to God to help me with my exam, and now I'm cheating. So I have to choose which way, either to cheat or to depend on God, and I always depend on God.
Yeah, and I mean, you're unique on many fronts, and I think your the directness and sort of your transparency about things like your faith, I think, is very unique for a billionaire. We don't typically see that. I think in our society, it's, these things have been completely sort of, the business world and sort of one's personal beliefs have been completely divorced from each other. Where did these principles come from?
Well, my mom, she raised us very near to God, and secondly, in life, I think I have a very good conscience, I mean, it came from life. The nearer you are to God, the more He puts more of His own into you. You understand? I believe that what is the meaning of conscious? For me, conscious is the device or the software that God put into us so He can make us accountable. Because I don't think that anybody that does something wrong doesn't know that it's wrong. And how does He know? It's His conscious. So He can't go to God later on and say, well, I wasn't really knowing what I was doing. Everybody knows,
Yeah, and I think the principled business person these days is one of the rarities, and so I think it's a differentiator in the market, and as you said, a reputational asset. I'd like to go back to your first business deal, the making of Naguib. Could you take us back to the story of when you did your first deal? What was it?
Okay, my first deals was started even when I was 10, 11, or 12 years. I was playing marble in the club, and I was very good at it, in aiming with the marbles. So I was always winning, and I was selling these marbles to other kids who had rich parents, and I was making a lot of money. This was my first business,
So these kinds of seeds were planted from a young age.
Yes, I think so.
I mean, to what extent was that something that was the air that you were breathing from within your family or within the environment that you're in? What shaped you early on in terms of your business acumen?
I was when I was 16, I wanted to be one of the richest people in the world, and it was not about the money. I am a Christian coming from a minority in Egypt, Coptic minority, and wanting to make a difference in the world would have been difficult being Christian, because the political scheme doesn't really allow Christians to climb into the political scene, So I thought that money is power. So I'm going to make a lot of money. And one of my dreams, actually, when I was still in school, was to have a private army, go to the Berlin Wall and break it down and free all the East Germans, which happened. I saw it happening alone, without my help, So for me, money was not a tool to buy a nice car or a nice house, but it was like I could do a lot of good with it,
I mean, there's the top 1%, and then there's the top 0.0001%. I'd love your take on, especially in our markets where there's this big gap between the haves and the have-nots. It's a big challenge. What do you think the role is and the responsibility of the wealthiest within our markets, within those markets?
Is enabling others to become better, to have a better income, to have a better life, and so on. I think it's an important task, and I feel I do part of that whenever I make lectures or when I'm invited by universities to speak to the younger generation and motivate them and so on. I feel I'm giving back into this direction. Moniify, for sure, is again under the same title, enabling and enriching, let's say it this way.
And you're a very reflecting person, I think, self-aware. I'm curious about, your own self-identified weaknesses and what you do in order to compensate for them.
I'll answer the second part. Nothing to compensate them. All what I've done is one time I wrote the list of all what I believe is self-criticism, is all my bad side. But to tell you, for example, one of my defaults is I have no patience. You can't have a baby in less than 9 months, okay? So how come I try still to bring it in 1 month, I mean, so I'm very impatient. I feel like life can end tomorrow. So try to get it done now. And sometimes you could make more money if you were more patient. I have a list of other stuff that I don't want to bore you with.
And what about your single biggest loss in business? And what did that teach you?
It was around 450 million euros in one shot, in one night.
Wow.
In cash.
In cash.
And it learned me never take a decision when you're when you're angry. Like if you take a decision when you're angry, it definitely is gonna not be the wrong decision. You know, that was the lesson learned, and I thank God I have not done that.
So 450 million euros in one night lost cash. You have to tell us some more about that.
First, it's a very sad story because I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up all night, you know, because in the morning I had to pay and make this loss. But the story goes like that. So I had this telecom company that was working in all the Middle East and North Africa, like Algeria, Tunisia, Egypt, and so on, and had an Italian operation called Wind. And in Greece too. So there was, in the telecom world, there was one company which was dancing wasn't really a real telecom company or a media company or a utility company called Vivendi. So I looked at Vivendi telecom arm, and they were present in Morocco and in France. So I put my company on it, and I found out, okay, if I do a merger with this company, we will have France, Italy, and Greece, all the Mediterranean, and I will add Morocco to my North Africa. It's a perfect match from a geographical point of view, also from a cultural point of view, which is important in this business. Yeah. I go to Vivendi, I meet the chairman, he loves the idea, and he refers me to the CEO. I go to the CEO. The CEO, of course, will lose his job because I was probably the new CEO if the merger took place. So he was very tensed.
Awkward conversation.
Not awkward, he was very defensive. He was a very weak character guy, and very defensive and very shocked and terrified from my presence. And he made a comment which was aggravating to me, you know. So he said, no merger. But we can give you 10% of the combined entity and the rest in cash. I told him I didn't come here to sell my company. And if I want 10% of your company, there's nothing you can do to prevent me. Tomorrow morning, I'll own 10% of your company, you know. It was a very bad meeting. And the guy was really, he was thinking about his job.
His own job,
the job
his own
he's going to
legacy,
do.
etc. Yeah.
I go out and I say, okay, I'm going to teach this guy a lesson, you know. I go out.
Is this the anger thing coming into?
I buy the 10%.
You bought 10%, yes.
I bought the 10% in anger. I took a margin loan to buy 10%.
Risky.
That I didn't want to put all my... And then the crash happened.
Ooh.
Remember the famous first crash?
Of course.
Margin loan, 450 euro, bye-bye.
Margin call.
Teaches you, keep your ego in the cupboard when you're taking decisions. Don't take a decision when you are angry.
Ouch. Who was the first person you told?
I'm pretty good in hiding my failures, so I think I
had to come out at some point.
I don't know. I didn't share it with anyone.
You didn't share.
Even though my dad is not here anymore, my late dad, he was my partner in my telecom group. So I couldn't go to my dad.
That's an awkward one, yeah.
And tell him you lost a third, which he would have lost 150, because my dad was very close. So I decided to take all the loss on my account and not tell him, you know, because my dad would get a heart attack if I, with €1 even. Would
And there's a lot of intrigue around the Sawiris family in general. The brothers, I mean, do you compete against each other on the Forbes list? Do you collaborate with each other? What insights can you give us about, you know, the family?
The Forbes list has a lot of bullshit. So I wish one time when they say the number that it's the right number, you know. And I always we try to avoid these lists.
Yeah.
These lists bring only negative stuff, you know, like bad eye, enviness, and all that. So
I agree.
I hate this list.
Me
you
too.
know. But we brothers, we are not competing because everybody has his own domain.
Yep.
And we try not to infringe. But also we are very different characters. So me, I'm the rocket, I'm the speed car that will not take his foot off the benzene pedal. You know? My youngest brother is very careful and systematic and conservative, you know, and he's media shy. He doesn't go out and speak, you know, and is more mind than heart, you know. So me, I'm more heart than mind. So that's not good in business, I think. And the middle brother is somehow a more of a visionary, easier going guy. He likes to take things easier and is enjoying life and doesn't feel that work and being the richest person on earth is important. So he's different from me and my youngest brother, you know. So everybody's different, you know.
And speaking of more heart than mind, I mean, you're one who's known for deep loyalty and, you know, really the relationship with your team and the people who you work with is something that's paramount. Has that backfired on you? And how does that, where does that?
Never.
Yeah.
It's actually has earned me respect, not just from my own people, but from my enemies, from people who don't like me, that I feel that people who work with me they are part of my family.
Yeah.
Their agony is my agony, their pain is my pain. I need to take care of them. I'll give you a small example. If you insult me, I might forgive, okay? If you insult anyone working with me, you will wish you were never born because of my reaction. So I feel like the pride of my people and their dignity is my dignity too. So I'm very, and I like to have fun. I like my team to be enjoying working with, together, not to feel like this is the job they're paying for their electricity and their car and their fees. It's just work has to be fun. You have to enjoy what you do. You know.
Naguib, tell us about your biggest business win.
Okay, a lifetime changer in my career was winning the first mobile license in Egypt, because there was an amazing twist, you know, where the government decided to issue the license, one license only, and the tender went out. 10 people bought the documents, 4 people decided they were going to bid, and then at the end only 2 companies bid. And my company was one of them. I was with France Telecom, and the other Egyptian partner was with Vodafone. And the tender document had said they will award the highest license payer or the lowest fee to the public. The other guy put 500 million for the license. I put 350, but my tariffs were a quarter of his tariffs.
Ooh.
I thought, stupidly thinking, I will make the lowest tariff so the population will cheer for me and I get the license. The other guy was maybe more intelligent. He thought, no, the governments look only at the money they take up front, so I put a high license. So they were going to award him. So I did a protest and I made a very strong fight, you know, and I said, no, it's not fair because you didn't put the formula. I told you put the formula, no. But I always go to governments with a solution when I complain. So I went to them, listen, why don't you just give 2 licenses?
Interesting.
So they told me, you will pay the higher license fee. I said, of course, but I'll take his fees. I'll pay the fees. I mean, I will have to raise my fees too. And I convinced the government that giving 2 licenses, first they cash $1 billion instead of 500 million. Second, they create competition for the consumer. The consumer is not going to be monopolized by one player only, and it brings double the investments, double the infrastructure, and so on. So the government and the president and everybody bought this idea, and I ended up with this license, which was a game changer in my life. Because once I got the Mobile license, the first license, I went around the whole Middle East and Africa and assembled all the licenses, and I created Orascom Telecoms. 2005, the market cap was $19 billion, and I was the 8th richest person in the world, you know.
Incredible. That one decision unlocked a business empire and led to an empire of
But because I didn't stop at Egypt, so I am very ambitious, so I decided to move around and replicate that.
Now, you know, going into a lot of these new markets, as you know, in the emerging market opportunities for young people today, if you were to recommend to them how to think about, you know, which markets to look at or what kinds of opportunities, is anything top of mind for people who are kind of just getting started in their careers?
You know, because this formula worked for me,
Yeah.
I can always refer to it, you know. go into places that nobody wants to go to. You see, that was my when I went to Algeria, they were killing and their own and slaughtering, and there was a lot of terror in the country. When I went to Iraq, it was during the war with Saddam. You know, when I went to Yemen, everybody thought you were crazy going to Yemen. So one element, because all the big guys, all the muscle corporates, they fear going to these areas.
Yeah.
So you will have a chance that you don't have the big guys to crowd you or to compete against you. That's one way to do it. Secondly is be a specialist in a specific area. That will give you a certain strengths that nobody.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because a lot of people nowadays are this jack of all trades. They
Yeah.
try to be very
Never
broad.
works. Never works.
I'm a big fan of being sort of deep.
Of course,
so tell
you
us
know,
more.
It's
Yeah.
like today, how many people don't know anything about Bitcoin? Many, still millions.
Yes.
So the guys who understand about Bitcoin, they have an edge. So that's why this is an example. You
Yes.
have to have an edge. It's like me, for example. I think I have an edge when it comes to gold. You know, that's why I am investing
Mining,
so
et cetera,
heavily.
yes.
There. So, second advice is try to have an edge. Try to be an expert in an area where few people are experts. You know. The third advice is don't think if you're smart you're going to make it. A lot of smart people around. It's the hard work becomes a differentiator. If you're not going to put hard work and hours behind your brilliant, so-called brilliant idea, it's not going to work, you know. So being just intelligent also doesn't have. I learned that too.
It's rarely about the idea, right? It's rarely about the
Yeah,
idea.
hard work is a must. You know?
Yes, the hard.
And then honesty. It's not a how can I say a luxury to be honest. No, it's a mandatory, because this first thing when you are not, it's the beginning of the end again. One time you fool, not 3 times. You know.
Exactly. So I'd like to ask you to put an investor hat on and to imagine yourself in the shoes of somebody early career who had amassed $10,000, let's say, a first $10,000 to be able to invest in something, and came to you for advice on what asset you would suggest they put that money into. And then I'd like to ask you a little bit about the risk, the accessibility, and the growth potential of that asset.
Artificial intelligence, but maybe now 3 years late, 2 years late, but it's never late. What people don't understand is that we have yet not seen the maximum or the end of artificial
Yeah, the
intelligence.
actual impact of it.
It's
in the
like a
market.
snowball, you know, that's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So as we know, it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. It means if you invest into artificial intelligence today, it won't go to zero. It actually has the probability that's going to go higher is much more, because we didn't really come to the utmost application of artificial intelligence.
And getting into that, would you recommend going for companies that are developing the applications, the infrastructure of it? How would you think about, what type of an asset in AI?
That's just a start, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
if ChatGPT was listed, that would be
It would be a
yeah, because when you go trying to take a stake in an unlisted company, it's a bit complicated, you know.
So let's talk about that sector, AI, in terms of the 3 dimensions, right? So on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the least and 5 being the most on risk, where would you place it?
1.
1, super low risk.
Yeah.
It's the new real estate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Super.
And accessibility, how easy is it to kind of get into and pick the right companies and find on a 1 to 5?
2.
2.
Yeah.
And growth potential, 1 to 5.
5.
Of course. And then for that person who had that 10,000, would you recommend they throw it all into this or to diversify that portfolio? And how so?
Don't take me responsible for this. I'm not responsible, but I would say throw it all. It's not it's a sure bet.
Amazing. What about your advice for the next generation? I mean, what do you advise your children, for example, about opportunities and, particularly we talked about AI, the impact that AI may be having on our emerging markets, or what they should be really focusing on in this next era?
Of course, I will also tell them all to focus on AI, and what my general advice to younger people is, don't look at Mark Zuckerberg there's a tendency in young people, I'm going to come up with this app and I'm going to be a billionaire.
Yeah.
And then they come up with apps that already exist or apps that have failed. So please take a moment to reflect on what you're doing and see if it exists or not. It's not, you didn't bring the wildest idea ever, And so focusing only on this, that I want to come up with an app so I can become very rich, is in my opinion, short-sighted.
Naguib, what are your ambitions for what comes next? Any big projects upcoming?
I'm not in the time of my life where I'm thinking money, even though the station is called Moniify. But I want to find out something that I can do for humanity that will keep. It's an egoistic thought, It's not like don't take only oh, what a nice man. No, I want to do something for humanity, which is either charitable or that I will be remembered with, something big, like my idea with the island and the refugees. I don't know if you know this.
Tell us more.
I don't know it's the forum or not, but anyhow, I had a big idea on buying an island in the Mediterranean and hosting all the refugees that are trying to leave from all the countries on this island, providing them jobs, building the island and giving them a new life until wars in Lebanon or in Syria, at that time, and Iraq and so on would end. And then when the wars end, they can go back to their homes, but you will have an island that will have a story. The immigrant story, it's like in America started, the same way.
Exactly.
So I never was helped by governments to achieve this idea because you need permissions, and so on. But this is the one thing I still want to do in my life,
I'd like to wrap up with a quick fire round of short answer questions. What's the most important skill to master?
The most important skill to master is negotiating.
The biggest deal you missed out on?
Buying a stake in Twitter when I had the cash.
The easiest way to make money?
Easiest way to make money? I would say the stock exchange, but it's also losing money. The easiest way to lose money.
Now, on a deal, would you prefer to split 50-50 or go all in?
What do you mean split 50-50?
Hedge your risks?
No, all in.
Deep research reports or gut instinct?
Gut instinct.
Favorite musician?
I have to find, I would say, Ed Sheeran.
Underrated country with huge potential?
Egypt.
When you move, big entourage or fly solo?
Solo.
Your go-to song when DJing?
I like house music, so it's difficult to say, but
Great.
there's one or two songs in house that are. And
your quickest fire. So what's the shortest tenure an employee has lasted on your team?
3 weeks. Was a general manager of my telecom, in my telecom operation. He insulted the Nubian helper in the office who was serving tea and coffee for us. And this man has been with the family for 25, 30 years, And he came to my room. I asked him to apologize. I told him, this guy has been with us 30 years and he's not used to it. He told him, idiot in front of everybody. And these people, the Nubians have a very high sense of nobility and pride. So please, just, in Arabic, I would say, طيب خاطره, understand? Just because he's...
Make it up to him.
He told me, and what if I don't? Which was the wrong answer. What do you mean why if you don't? I said, if you don't, you mean if you don't, you'll go home. So he told me he'll fire me as a general manager for the guy who makes the tea and coffee. I said, yes, it's not about that. It's about respect. If you're gonna not respect this guy, he's been 30 years with the firm, with my family. And he told me, up to you. I said, okay, you're fired.
Wow. And
it's a true story.
Will I have a job after this interview?
Actually, I'm impressed.
Thank you, Naguib. Naguib, thank you for being with us here on Money Moves. Naguib was an obvious first guest. Now I want to know from you, who should I interview next? Let me know in the comments.